Thanks for staying with us on SABC News. The BankservAfrica Take-home Index shows a slight recovery in South Africa's take-home pay, reaching the highest level since October 2022, but still 1.8% below the level measured a year ago. The job market is, however, stabilizing, with a few jobs created in February, though it's still playing catch-up from the heavy losses caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. So the very challenging economic environment in South Africa, including low economic growth and high inflation, is expected to keep the job market lackluster and erode the purchasing power of households. Let's speak to independent economist Elize Kruger. Elize, thanks so much for your time on SABC News. Just talk to me about how what ends up in the BankservAfrica Take-home Index is collated.
I hear you a bit difficult, but let me just start off by saying that the BankservAfrica Take-home Pay Index measures the total value of all salaries paid into the bank accounts of South Africans in a particular month, divided by the number of salaries. So it is a snapshot of the average take-home pay salary in South Africa in the month of February.
We saw that there was a recovery, and I hope that you can hear me, Elize. Are there certain sectors that we're seeing more of a recovery in? But you're saying it's also not quite a reason to celebrate, right?
Yes, there was indeed a recovery. So it was the highest in the past 4 months. So a nice blip on the graph. But the Bankserv data is not looking at it at a sectoral level. It is really looking at the movements of salaries, in and out of the bank accounts, but not at the sectoral level. So it's overall a function of, I would say, perhaps after we've seen quite a bit of a decline in December and January, a bit of a recovery in Feb. But yes, it is indeed a positive to see that it is about the highest in 4 months.
All right. And then what is inflation doing to salaries? Can you see that?
Yes, indeed. Inflation is eroding the purchasing power of South Africans still on an ongoing basis. And that's been very much evident if you look at the take-home pay in real terms, accounting for inflation. We've still had a notable drop compared to a year ago, talking about in 8.3%. So that's quite a notable decline. Yes, and that shows us that even if you do get a salary increase, if it's not in line with inflation, at the end of the day you are worse off. So inflation remains a negative factor for us at the moment.
All right, and then I'm assuming that negative impact would also extend to pension payments as well.
Well, interestingly enough, the BankservAfrica data indicated that average pension payments kept up well compared to what happened to inflation. So in nominal terms, pensions were up by 6.2% on a monthly basis, and in real terms, a marginal drop of 0.8 in the month of Feb. But actually, if you look at it over a period of a year, it really indicated to us that pensions held up well. And that's a very positive development. So at least your pensioners out there didn't experience the exact, or to the same extent, an erosion of purchasing power compared to salary earners.
Okay, and Elize, yesterday we saw stats saying that in the formal sector, around 48,000 jobs were created in the fourth quarter. That's very worrying numbers in a country with an expanded definition of around 10 million people unemployed. Also worrying is the Reserve Bank saying we're going to see around 0.3% economic growth this year. The IMF actually saying 0.1% growth this year. So even fewer jobs set to be created. What's the impact going to be on salaries, if any?
Yes, I think number one, the impact on employment is perhaps where one will have to start. This is not an environment conducive for job creation. The growth is too low, and a lot of companies are currently in a survival mode, trying to just survive all the economic headwinds, be it high production cost, load shedding, all of those adding to the difficulty in keeping doors open. So from the point of view of a number of employment opportunities, I think we're going to have a hard year in 2023. As it is, you mentioned the data from Stats SA, we are still playing catch up to get back to levels of pre-COVID. Now, we've been hit hard in terms of job losses during the COVID pandemic, and we are still playing catch up. And, this type of low growth environment, as you mentioned, the number is very close to zero, it's not conducive for job creation. And therefore also, if you look at the salary space, as companies are struggling, it's also not an environment conducive for, very fat salary increases. So yes, I think companies try to accommodate the employees, everybody having to struggle with high inflation. But if you have to have a choice between keeping doors open and keeping employment numbers static, as opposed to giving big increases, you perhaps will go for the latter. So I think it's going to be a difficult year in the employment market in 2023.
Elize Kruger, an independent economist, just talking us through that BankServ data that's come out and looking at the future of jobs and salaries. Really appreciate your time on SABC News this afternoon.